Well, this is a talk that's a bit unlike anything I've ever given in my life, so bear with me. So it goes back to 1987. I was originally called Garry Sargeant. It concerns the journey to my first ever published book, which was published under my original name, and how this book came to be. So I'm taking you on a journey, a trip. 1987 was International Year of Shelter for the Homeless. And I'm at home, my home was then in Woy Woy, which is about an hour north of the northernmost part of a Sydney suburb. And I was writing a series of articles on how to translate what people said and what they actually mean, right? So the most popular one was how to translate doctor's bullshit, right? And it was the doctor would say things like, well, you can't tell with these things, they come and they go. This actually translates as you've got 3 months left to live, right? Or if you've got like a few weeks left to live, they say, oh, we're just going to top you up with blood and send you home. So then you'll know, okay? So, but one of these articles I wrote was how to translate teachers' report cards. Like when the teacher writes something like a good term's work, it actually translates as, I don't really remember this child. And if they say a fair term's work, it means none of the teachers really remember this child. Or persistent, which means thick but does their homework, okay? So it was how to translate teacher's report card bullshit. And on this day, 10th of March 1987, I get a call and talk to the editor at the Times on Sunday. And she starts talking, she says, it's a very funny article. Can you make it less funny? And I thought, this is a very strange request. I've never had anybody request that I make something less funny. And then she suddenly comes out of the blue and she says, what are you doing with your life? And I'm going, what is this, 20 questions or something, right? And it turns out she wants somebody to go on the street for 3 days and 3 nights and write an article about it for that Sunday's Times on Sunday, this is a Tuesday. And she says, yeah, she offers me this gig of going out in the street. Now, to live with the homeless. Now, I didn't jump up and down and go, yeah, that's one of my dreams. It's like, you know, go out in the street with the homeless, no money, no security, no backup, you know, tiny amount of money. And I'm thinking, so I have to talk to my agent. Oh, you've got an agent, how boring. Well, he sent you the article. So I could talk to the agent and he's sort of like, oh my God. He's like, what about, you know, health insurance and stuff? What if things go terribly wrong? And I said, what about my dog? I've got a dog. Who's going to feed the dog? And my car was malfunctioning. It wasn't working. And apparently he phones up the agent and the agent says, oh, I'll do $20 a night for put it in a dog refuge. And my agent says, I won't take a percentage of the refuge fees for the dog, right? So anyway, I said yes. So I caught a taxi to the Woy Woy station and I smuggle the dog on the train and I get off at Epping where my mother's place is, my father and brother also live, and I drop the dog off and I throw down some food and then I'm in a taxi on the way to things. Now, of course, I had to put together some sort of survival kit for on the road. So fortunately I had an army greatcoat. This isn't the one, although my army greatcoat also had sergeant stripes on because my name was Sergeant at the time. And I took a couple of wind cheaters. I wore the sort of clothes you keep around to do painting jobs and stuff like that. I hadn't shaved for days. I desperately needed a haircut. So that was the sort of fortunate thing. So I go into the office where the woman is. This isn't the woman or the office, of course, just represents it. And she's talking about what she wants, and she says, look, phone up every day to assure me you're still alive. And she says, you know, don't get raped or mugged, but if you do, it would make good copy. Yeah, good on you. So I go out on the street, day one. I don't know anything about how to be homeless, right? I know that the homeless tend to hang around Central Station in Sydney. So I go there, and sure enough, there's some homeless there, and there's a sign up. By the way, at first she said, you can take $20 out, and then she talked to somebody else, and she said, you can take $10 and a couple of some change. So I got $10 to survive 3 days and 3 nights. And there was a sign up for salvos and say, if you're in trouble, phone this number. But apart from anything else, I don't want to spend the 30 cents on making a phone call. So this is another view of Central Station, and across the road to, he says, hopefully it's not really showing up. Anyway, on the left, there's a park, Belmore Park, which I knew homeless tended to go to. So I wandered across to that. And yes, there's homeless in the park. And there's homeless people sleeping in the park, and it's daytime. By bad luck, I'd only had like 5 hours sleep the night before. So I'm pretty tired already. It's like about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So I lie down, and of course, it's much safer to sleep in the daytime. It's warmer, much, much safer. So I lie, and I don't know where I'm sleeping that night. So I lie down, and I have like an hour's sleep. When I wake up, it's like dusk. And there's a park bench in Belmore Park where there's Aboriginals gathered around drinking, and there's a couple of whites there. So I wander towards the park bench because I've got to meet the homeless and strike up conversations with them, and I still haven't yet really worked out a cover story about why I'm homeless and stuff. I'm not going up to them and saying I'm a journalist. So as I'm going up, just get there, the Mission Beat van arrives. And they're trying to persuade the Aboriginals to come in off the street. But they're having a good time getting drunk and stuff. No, we don't need it. And so what they do is that some of the Aboriginals, if somebody's getting drunk or run down, they try to get them to go into like detox for a while or go into a refuge for a while. So they're trying to get one of the older ones in. You say, no, not going in, keep drinking. But I go up to them and I think, if I could drive around in be driven around in the Mission Beat van for a while, I could get to see some of the, homeless people on the streets and stuff. It'd be good research. So I go up and I say, what's your name? And I say, Garry. And they say, oh, yeah, where do you want to go? And I go, anywhere. Like, I just want to get in the van and be driving around. As soon as I get in the van, they get on the radio and say, oh, we've got a Garry here, to come into the refuge. And they say, and on the other side, they say, drunk or sober? And they go, sober. And say, yeah, bring him in. So unexpectedly, because the editor at the Times on Sunday said, don't sleep in a refuge on your first night. Sleep open, because I want you to sleep in the refuge in the last night so you come in fresh to write the article. She didn't know what refuges were like, right? But anyway, so I end up, unexpectedly, at the Sydney City Mission, their intake centre. And I'm checked in, and the guy's saying, why are you here? And I said, I used to live in Melbourne for a while. So I said, I've just come up from Melbourne and I was escaping a bad situation and I don't want to talk about it. And I fall back and some of my acting and I cry and stuff. So he doesn't, because I still don't have really a cover story as to why I'm homeless. And they give me, of course they feed me, they feed all these people. And you don't get to say, well, I'd like this and I'd like some bacon. And, you just get whatever you're given, you eat, right? And a lot of people are like this. There's reasons they're homeless, right? They're not homeless for no reasons. They can have mental or physical problems. And this guy's obviously been on the street and been bashed up. And that alcohol is a big issue. So, and I was assigned a bed. This is actually the bed that I was assigned. This was 21. And even though it's just a slab of rubber and there was some cigarette burns in it, which was amazing because you're not supposed to smoke in the dormitories or anywhere, and you're supposed to go outside. And the pillow, oh my God. The pillow is easily the worst pillow I've experienced in my life. It was made of straw, right? So I just ended up discarding the pillow and using rolled up wind cheaters as a pillow. Now I will be reading sections of the book because otherwise, you won't get it quite the same flavour otherwise. I am woken up by someone coming in late. He takes the bed nearest the windows, first opening them wide up. This is in autumn, in cold autumn, and pushing the curtains to the side so the maximum amount of cold air gets into the dormitory and light. So we're hearing trucks and cars coming roaring past. I wake up again. A door has slammed. Some guy going to the urinal. I'm cold, so I put on one of the wind cheaters I was using for a pillow. Still cold. I put on one of the blankets that came with the bed. Still cold. The one blanket. There wasn't more than one. I noticed that the other people are happily sleeping with only a sheet on. They are not suburban soft like I am. Using my army greatcoat as a blanket, I finally get just warm enough. Now, the next morning, I've got in the book, it's woken up by a prison guard, which is sort of how it feels like, right? It feels like, because you've just woken up early, like 6 o'clock or something, because they want to feed you and get you out. Anyway, and I agreed the night before to help clean up as part of, gratitude for staying. So I helped them clean up, and it's laundry day. They're collecting the sheets and the pillow slips. In one section of the men's dormitories, there is a bearded, pencil-thin man, perhaps in his 20s. He is pale, but his face is smooth and lined. He is making his bed with precision. So I tell him, don't make the bed. We're collecting the sheets and pillow slips. So he raises a finger and he answers me in a series of clicks. Mentally shot. Another man speaks with a slight British accent, and he seems to be very, very together. His clothes are very well presented. It's very clean, and I wonder how he comes to be in the refuge. And only later do I realise he has most of his left hand missing. So I'm talking to a number of the people from the refuge, and then I wander down to Belmore Park again, which isn't too far from where I was staying, and I sit down on the bench, and I start to make some notes, because I took some scrap paper with me so I could make notes while I was on the street. And I actually have a cover thing where I have a piece of paper that says, "Dear Jeff," as if I'm writing a letter, because why would I make notes while I'm on the street, right? And the Aboriginals who were there the night before drinking come again to start drinking. 9:30 a.m. in the morning. And they're very friendly, actually. And I've met a couple of them through Kevin. In any case, they're very friendly. They sit down around me like I'm there every day. This happens all the time. And they drink from a shared bottle. So this is Belmore Park. And this is the where I was, the table where I was making notes. We'll come back to that scene. And I get to meet some of the Aboriginals, and one of them is Mick. Mick is the guy who's on the right there. Oh, sorry, the left as you look at it. He's on the left, Mick. You might notice that his left wrist is bandaged. It's bandaged and he's got scabs on his knuckles. So he's obviously been in a fight. And he's actually dating the woman on the right there, Apples. They're quite an item, and they're very keen on each other. So I start falling in to drinking with them. Now what they tend to drink is this, if they have an option, fortified wine, okay? Because most bang for your bucks, right? It was only cheap, it was about $8 for a flagon, and they pass it round the group, all right? So I do the round. So it came to you take a couple of swigs and pass it on. And you couldn't wipe the top of the bottle because that was like rude, right? Disrespectful. And so that's what I was doing, right? I'm thinking, I'm glad they ruled that AIDS, because this is the AIDS era, I'm glad they ruled that AIDS doesn't get transferred by saliva. But of course, other germs do. So I'm drinking with them for a while and I decide, I can't do this all day. They might be able to do it all day, but I can't. So after a while, and I get to hear some of their stories and stuff, and because I don't react the same way some of them do, they sort of say, oh, one of them, Uncle Jerry, that's Uncle Jerry, the grey-haired Aboriginal on the far left there, facing the camera. He says, it's an odd life, but we enjoy it. And I agree with him. I say, look, because they're a group, right? They're like a tribe. Like, across the park, there's whites by themselves getting drunk and stuff. But these people, actually, they try to look after each other in their own way. So I have an excuse, I've got to go somewhere, and I wonder if I go to Hyde Park and have a bit of a sleep there, and then I go to the toilet near St James Station, and sure enough, some businessman type follows me in and looks at my dick while I'm going to the toilet. Very common in public toilets in those days. You can see how people fall into different ways of earning money. So, night time. Now, I said when I left the Aboriginals, you're going to be there when I get back. What time are you going to get back? Oh, maybe 5 o'clock. And they said, we're always here. By the way, there's lots more in the book, of course. I went up to the Hari Krishna Centre in King's Cross and got a feed there, and they were really nice. And I went back to the Aboriginals to start drinking again at like 6:30 at night. And so I'm sitting there with a greatcoat on, as you can see the greatcoat, and this very drunk, very big Aboriginal comes up to me, grabs me by the collar and says, give me coat. And I'm going, I'm not giving you the coat. I've got to sleep out. You're not getting the coat, right? So I've got to sleep out. He's only got a short sleeve shirt on. It's unbelievable. And then he says, give me a coat. And, no, I'm not, really sorry, I've got to sleep out. And Mick gets involved. He's great, Mick, and he says, Rossi, sit down, have a drink. But this Rossi never takes his eyes off me and the coat, right? And anyway, then eventually the alcohol runs out, right? I'd help contribute to some flagons and stuff. And the alcohol runs out, so Mick wants to go up the cross. So I'm keen to go with him because I want to get away from Rossi, and I've had enough drinking anyway. So we head up the cross. And Mick introduces me to some of the young kids up the cross. There are a younger crowd up there. And he introduces, by the way, fortunately, Lulu, who was one of the Aboriginal women drinking in Belmore Park, she gave me a sleeping tablet, right? I'd never had sleeping tablets outside of hospital, but I thought, this could be handy, right? So I've got sections in the book on different young Aboriginals I met in the cross. Tim looks nothing more or less than like Tom Cruise's younger brother. He has straight hair, but he too is related in some way to the other Aboriginals. He is skiting because he just got laid. He recounts, how do you like it, I asked her. Hard. So I gave it to her, and he mimes. I met her before. She's from Campbelltown. Never gave me the time of day before, but she was drunk, I was sober, so I had the advantage. And I said, where do you find to do it around here? There are places if you know them. So the youths wander away from me, and I'm really tired, so I sit down, right? And I'm hoping to get a bit of sleep, but when I close my eyes and nod off a bit, the world and my stomach start turning because of all the alcohol I've had, okay? Also, the youths in the cross give me a couple of beers. So I wake up, and after maybe a micro sleep, and right near me, as soon as I wake up, I see a discarded container of takeaway Chinese food, I assume it was, rice and some meat. So I pick it up, and there's a fork. I start eating it straight away. And at the time, I was fairly vegetarian. I mainly ate chicken apart from vegetables. But I had the rice, and I was still hungry, and so I had the meat, which was either pork or chicken. The previous time I'd had pork, I hadn't been too well. But anyway, but then only after I eat it, I thought, oh, what about the germs? But because I had that night, I don't go to bed hungry, and now it's like midnight or later. by the way, I'll just describe this woman. Nearby on another bench, an old lady has set up her home. For her, home is a thin mattress on half of one of the long benches of Fitzroy Gardens in King's Cross. She has gone to bed for the night, an umbrella over her head. Everything is neat. A suitcase under the bench, plenty of blankets. Her home, kept neat and orderly, as she's probably kept every place she's lived in her life. I'm interested, and John, another of these Aboriginals in their late teens, and he looks full-blood Aboriginal, and Mick is furious with him, and he suspects John has been popping pills, so he slaps him across the face hard, and a pill pops out of his mouth and onto the ground. Mick steps on it. It shatters into a white sparkling dust. You been fucking popping pills again? No man, just Mogadon. They're not fucking Mogadons, they're fucking Serapaks. No man, Mogadon. Mick is furious. Mogadons aren't fucking white, they're fucking Serapaks. No man, don't pop fucking pills. Be a drunk. Being a drunk's all right. It's all right to be a drunk, but if I catch you fucking popping pills, I'm going to kick your ass all around the park. No, man, don't do that. I love you, man. I've got a good mind to take you over there and give you a hiding right now. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to phone up your sister. John cringes, shrinking into himself. No, man, don't do that. Please don't phone Mary Ann, man. I fucking will. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to phone Mary Ann, and she's going to get the bus from Mildura, and together we're going to kick your ass all around this park. No, man, please don't phone my sister, man. I love you. So I'm sitting in King's Cross with Mick, John, Apples and Chris, another young Aboriginal. And these other young Aboriginals run in and say that some whites have been hassling them. They call them gubs. In those times, the Aboriginals used to call whites gubs. I don't know where that expression comes from. Maybe from Gubner, I don't know. But they always referred to the whites as gubs. So there's no question about whether this fight's justified. Mick and the other Aboriginals, rush off to see if they can help in the fight. John tries to, but he can't stand. So Apples and I push him back into his seat. I trail the group that's headed for the fight. There are 3 white guys standing in the entrance to the Astoria hotels and about 6 Aboriginals. Not all of them will fight. Brief words are exchanged and the gubs smile inanely. They do not see what's coming. So the gub on the white gets floored by a series of punches from a young Aboriginal. One of the other guys is going, I don't want to fight, and he runs and he gets chased. I never find out what happened to him. And I didn't see it, but apparently Mick took out the white in the middle. He just hit him with one punch, he was strong, and he went 6 foot backwards, and that was the end of that. So from the book, there is a code, you see. The Fitzroy Gardens, the cross is their home. They feel they have the rights to it. They're only fucking visitors. We live here, says Mick. Mick points to a small park across the road. I lived in that park for 3 years. Visitors give them hassles in their home, they cop a hiding. Fucking gub, says Tim. Sorry, he says half apologetically to me as we're sitting on a bench back in the gardens. There is talk of the fight. John, the one who's doing drugs as well, and he starts half singing a song about Captain Cook and how he should have been strung up, that the land was stolen. And he looks aggressively at me. And I say, I agree with you. He does not seem to believe me. No, I think you're right. It was stolen. He still does not believe me. I put my arm around him and he believes me then. He says, I love you, man. And he says and kisses me on the cheek. Sorry, I'm getting very involved. This is like the cross. This is where we were sitting down at night on the Fitzroy Gardens, and of course it was dark. And this is the sort of place they were when the whites were confronted by the Aboriginals. All right, so now it's late. I don't know what time it is. Didn't have a watch, of course. And we head to where Apples and Mick and I are going to sleep the night on the street. This is a screenshot from a video, but it gives you some sort of idea about why this is a good place to sleep, okay? Firstly, there's a wall, there's chip bark, and the chip bark is softer than concrete. And also there's a wall at the back, so you can sleep with your wall against the back, so you can only be approached from one side. and you're sort of behind a bit of trees, so you're not so visible. And Apples and Mick, they left a sort of mattress there, a rubber thing there that they would sleep on. So, and Mick offers me a blanket, right? I can't believe it, you know. But I say, look, oh, no, you know, you might need it. And they go to sleep pretty soon, and with just the one blanket. And I have everything on that I can, fingers, gloves, beanies, the wind cheater. I actually gave away a wind cheater. I was supposed to be alone, but I never got it back earlier. And I go to sleep at first. Fortunately, I had a sleeping tablet from Lulu, God bless her. Otherwise, God knows. But of course, it's still noisy. It's very close to a street, and there's still traffic going past, like in the middle of the night. Not too much, though. And I wake up in the middle of the night, and I need to go to the toilet. And it's a pretty visible park. And I think I'll go to... there's a public toilet nearby, but I would have never gone in there at night time, and it was locked anyway. So I found a sort of tree, semi-private, and I went for a piss. And I ended up having to get the spare blanket anyway from Mick and Apple so that I could get back to sleep. And I put it all over the top of me. I just didn't use it as a blanket. It was a total covering. So we wake up there the next day, and it turns out we pretty soon find out that there was a stabbing just around the corner during the night. And we get woken up because the traffic picks up, like 5:30 in the morning or whatever, and the traffic's picking up. And it's, in a sense, it's good because they want you to eat early in these refuges and stuff and get out of the way. So we get there in time. They take me up to a soup kitchen, and lots of other things happen. But at lunchtime, I come back to Matthew Talbot, which is not too far from here, and I put this photo up because when you get to Matthew Talbot, you get like a ticket for a meal, which says ticket. And you then sit in rows of seats like this. All these just guys, it's just for guys. And they're all looking at the screen, right? They're just all, there's no conversation like with the Aboriginals. They're just all looking at this screen. And then when the guy comes to the front row and he says, they all stand up as a unit and they all just shuffle forward, handing in their ticket, and then they shuffle off to have a meal. So I found myself, 1987, inexorably reminded of one of the great ads of all time from 1983/4. This is really reminiscent of what it was like. Of course, there wasn't any good-looking blonde woman in there. So much like what I was like. And of course, she smashes the screen there, hypnotised by a big brother, and the motto is, in 1984, it won't be like 1984 because Apple's introducing the Macintosh. So then you get the feed, and the food was really good, probably the best meal I had, warm and nice, and you can see a guy there, if you leave food behind, somebody else grabs it, right? He's putting his fork in there to grab it. That was a little bit previous. Let's go back. And so I'm walking on the way out, so I want to describe something that happened to me when I'm walking out. A guy in front of me asked for a towel so I can have a shower, and I'm thinking, oh my God, you can have a shower here. Like, I haven't changed my clothes, even taken anything off for like, I don't know, a couple of days or something. So I asked, can I get a towel and a shower? Yeah, have a towel and the soap and everything. So, reading from the book. Oily, greasy, tired. Some strangers have let me have a shower, and the emotions mix around. Gratitude to the people who have let me have a shower, greater gratitude that they don't expect thanks even, they just do it because it needs to be done, and shame about having to depend on the mercy of strangers, and relief, just relief. Leaning against the shower recess, I try to swallow back the tears. Elsewhere, someone is singing in the showers. So the shower is warm, and I'm starting to feel human again, and I cry in the semi-privacy of the cubicle. A few tears washed into the water and soap. And I feel so good. Now, what I do is, to the last possible minute, to put my socks back on, right? You can imagine thick socks, grungy, oily, haven't changed them in days. They've got actually scratchy stuff from sleeping on the chip bark and everything. And I phone up, the third phone call, I phone up the editor, who's of course glad I'm alive and glad I slept in the open, and she tells me, okay, we need photographs for the article on Sunday. We have to get photographs. So this presents me with a big issue. How am I going to keep my cover intact with a photographer from a national newspaper? We seem to have not be working at the moment. Trying to get it working. Anyway, so I've got to come up with some sort of cover story where I can get the photographer and keep my cover intact. And I talk to the photographer on the phone and I say, look, okay, one thing is, when I introduce you to people, you don't know my name, okay? You forget my name, even though I've told you that. Which brings up an interesting thing, that I never once repeated my name on the street. You would tell them and they would just remember your name. Because like, people are more important there, right? That's all you got. It's your friends. So I take the photographer to one place where he can watch me eating on the street. And this is a photograph of me that he took. I'm wearing the greatcoat. And then I have to get him to meet the Aboriginals to take a photo of the Aboriginals. And that's an issue, right? So I said, look, this is what we're going to do. You're going to buy a flagon of tawny port, which you got wrong. It ended up being 2 bottles of wine. And so it looks like a bribe so that they will accept you and let them take the photo. So I go back to Belmore Park, and of course they're in Belmore Park drinking already. And I go up to one group and say, can you take your photo? No, wanted. I'm wanted. Can't take photo. Take the photo over there. They'll be okay. So I go to the group around the table. This is where this photo comes from. Okay. And they're quite happy because they're getting a couple of bottles of wine out of it, and they say, well, yeah. And I said, look, I ran into this guy. It's International Year of the Homeless, and he wants to take some photos. So I thought, I get him to buy a couple of, bottle of wine for us and stuff. And they said, great, good idea, right? So they say, when's it coming out? Because I want to see their photo in the newspaper. And he did well. He said, what's your name again? Like he'd forgotten my name. And eventually he wanders off. Now, I said, you need to give us a couple more. I do what the homeless would do. I hit him for a couple of dollars for the next flagon of port, right? And he gives me $2, and I do what I'd seen other homeless do. I reached into his wallet and took out another $2, right? And I go back to the group, and Apples see what she did, see what I did, and she said, he reached into the wallet and took out another $2. And Mix goes, good on you, mate, you're going to be okay, right? And so we're back drinking again. But now there's another issue, and the issue is I can't sleep out. For starters, they don't want to sleep out in the open so much that night because of the stabbing the night before, and they try to have an occasional night in refuges to get some more rest, I guess. And I want to sleep in Central Station, so I have to come in. And if they knew that, they'd try to stop me because they're like mates now. Mick and I especially, we become very fond of each other, and so I come up. I've got to have a reason. So I said, look, I'm going to catch the last train up to Gosford. It'll be so late they won't check the tickets. I've got a friend up there, blah, 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 blah. And Mick and I say goodbye, and it's actually quite like emotional because we've become so friendly. Let's see if I can find it. All right. Earlier that evening, Mick talked to me about his past. His mother was Aboriginal, his father was possibly a Maori. His father killed his mother when he was a kid, really young. He only got 2 years for it. 2 fucking years. I know where he lives. After that, he was fostered out. We grasp hands. Mick tells me that I'm welcome anytime. You're all right. Thanks for everything, mate. We put our arms around each other and hug like brothers. I will miss him. So I wander up to Central Station, where I'd seen and this grand hall at Central Station. This is where I slept, on a bench. I'll read you another section from the book. A man approaches me. I'm sitting on the bench I'm going to sleep on. A man approaches me, asks where I can get a cup of coffee. He is a wizened man with a contorted face and very crooked teeth. His trousers are worn thin from constant usage. The grime seems to be ingrained into the actual fabric. It would be months since they were washed. He has a noticeable humped back. He is not more than 4'10". When he shambles off, he leaves behind a fetid odour that strikes me as a mixture of metho, stale urine, and perhaps other excretions. In the many hours of looking at sad figures, he is the saddest of all. He, like me, sleeps that night on a bench in Central Station. So, it turns out Central Station has a big downside. And I'll understand why some of there were already asleep at like 10 o'clock. Because it starts early at Central Station. You know, people come in early, 5:30 in the morning, and suddenly there's all these commuters and stuff, and you get woken up. And it's still, I've got to go off the street that day and actually work on the article. And it's very, as you might gather, it's a pretty overwhelming experience. So I start to make notes when I'm on the street, when I'm sitting there in the railway station. I am sitting in Central in the last few hours of my time on Nowhere Street, and I'm trying to draw it all together. The editor will want probably 2,000 words. I will want her to run a series. It's like sending a person to another planet and asking for a 50-word précis. That might be a lot easier in a way, because the sad and overpowering thing is that this is our world. I feel tempted to use the phrase a secret world, but it's not secret. It's there in the parks and on railway benches, sitting in city gutters. It's not secret. What you do behind closed doors, that's secret. People live their lives in public places, these people. The only privacy they get is when they turn the knob on the toilet door. Yes, you have secret lives. People on Nowhere Street live the most public lives of them all. We will them to make it a secret. We look the other way. We cross the street. We sidestep them when they ask us for 40 cents. In our hearts, we want them to live their lives and suffer their hunger pangs in places we can't see them. What do you need to survive on Nowhere Street? Not food. Plenty of places to get food for free. Whatever warmth you can carry. Blankets in a bag, I suggest. My greatcoat was too obvious, made me a target. What you really need is sleeping tablets. A couple every night to help you sleep. Through the snores and the slamming of doors, sleep on the uncomfortable hardness of railway seats, and get back to sleep after the railway guards have woken you to tell you to move on. To help you sleep in the park when rats scurry over you. To help you sleep on wood chips. And by the way, I had 2 sleeping tablets I used on that last night. So, the article. So I had to wait around until the office opened so I could get in. So I got in the office, and there's a monitor set up and said, do not use this monitor unless you're Garry Sargeant. So I start. Now, it's overwhelming what I've been through. So the words just pour out, right? Relentlessly pouring out, and the editor doesn't come in till late. I'll read you, and I do a false start, and then I find a better start for it that I like more. See if I can put my finger on this. Finally, I have a concept, a tone for the article. I write a new beginning. 3 Nights on Nowhere Street by Garry Sargeant. I spent 3 days on the street. Actually, time there is not measured in days, it is measured in nights. Where you spent the last night and where you're going to spend the next. Other than that, you are nowhere or anywhere. It's almost, and from further on, it's almost a matter of pride not to spend anything on food. Anyway, and I described some, and finally I had a tone that was right, so I started again. It's 12:50, nearly 1 p.m, and the tone of the article works. It's still a bit scattered. The word total reads 4,358 words. And the editor comes in and she's horrified that there's so much material already. And I'd say to her, we shouldn't use the names, right? I didn't present myself as a journalist. We should change the names. No, we have to use the names of the people on the street. So, well, I can't remember them all. I can't remember one in particular. Go to the toilet, remember the name. And this was a guy who told me he'd broken the law and was wanted. I didn't want to remember his name, right? And I couldn't remember his name, and I didn't want to. And then when she jumps up, I add more, and she's got to go off somewhere else. I add a few more things, and she's horrified that I've added more things. And I write another paragraph to near the end. When I finally come to leave Nowhere Street, I leave Mick and Apples and Uncle Jerry with emotional farewells. I've told them I'm hitching further north, blah, blah, blah. They want to take me down to a refuge and make sure I get a bed for the night. Nobody wants to sleep out after the stabbing. I know they wouldn't let me go and sleep at the railway station. They are good people and they look after their friends. Mick tells me that I'm welcome any time and that I'm all right as far as he is concerned. He's been a good mate to me and I tell him so. We clasp hands and hugs. I will miss him. So I'm exhausted. I've written all I can pretty much and I slump on the floor and the editor takes over. But then about halfway through, I realise that she's not editing. She's rewriting. So I drag myself off the floor, sit on the chair, and for the second half of the article, I'm modifying and trying to stop her do things and get it right. And then it's like 4 p.m. and it has to go off. So it has to go off and be typeset. By the way, my name was 3 Nights on Nowhere Street, and the editor comes in, let's call it 3 Nights on Lonely Street. I said, some of these people are not at all lonely. They're less lonely than the people in suburban houses. They've got friends and stuff, right? And so she said, okay, well, 3 Nights on Nowhere Street. By the way, when I walked in the office, what really struck me, how effing clean it was. Even the garbage was clean. The stuff in the garbage bins was like clean garbage. I couldn't believe it. This is a sort of terminal I was working on. It was assigned to me. So the article comes out. Notice it's called 3 Nights on Lonely Street, because somehow the typesetter changed it to Lonely Street, right? I start to read it and I throw it away across the room. I'm so disgusted by the first half of the article. A friend who reads it actually phones me up and says, he saw the article, he thought it was good. He said, I have to say, the second half of the article was a lot better than the first half of the article. I said, yeah, funny about that. So I've come off the street and I'm back in Woy Woy and I contact my agent who's glad I'm alive and I say, there's a book in this. And he says, no. And I say, well, I have to write it anyway. It's like burning through me. And he says, well, if you have to write it and we'll see what's possible. All right, so the process of writing the book. I went back onto the street. I did about the first draft. It was in a pretty good shape. And of course, I basically lied to these people. This is Mick again. I basically lied to these people about who I was and what I was doing. And I thought, I wonder if I'm going to cop a hiding. It's my 5th attempt to find Mick and Apples this week. I kept going back to Belmore Park, but unbelievably they weren't there. Neither was Uncle Jerry or Herb or Lulu. They said, we always hear they're not here. Eventually I find them near Matthew Talbot Refuge, near where we slept in the park. And they're drinking wine. And Mick sees me, his face lights up. Garry! And Apple says, where you been, my darling? Up north, they say, taking a flag and a port out of my haversack, passport. And we grab and I kiss Apples on the cheek. And I say, you saw the article when it came out and the photos? Yeah, we were all in it. Hey, Uncle Jerry, the lot of us, we were all in it. They'd actually bought a copy of the newspaper, amazingly. I wrote it, yeah. So I'm saying, looks like I'm not going to cop a hiding for lying to them. And I said, were you surprised that I turned out to be a reporter? Didn't you resent me for not telling you? Nah, he's just happy to see me. I show them a draft of the book and show it's dedicated to them, to Mick and Apples and others. And they're delighted. Anytime anybody says anything slightly negative about me, Mick jumps in and says, hey, you know, listen, he knows what it's about. He lived with us for 3 days. He slept with us in that park over there. One guy's particularly drunk and not sure about me because I'm a gub. And he asked me not to mention his name, and he starts singing an anthem of blacks, which I get him to repeat. So, wake up, white man. Now the white man's taken all our land, leaving us nothing except empty hands. Can't get jobs because we're black. We're rated second-class people, and that's a fact. When all we want is land and recognition, not to be drunk and thrown in prison. Now a white man wonders why we all fight, when all we want is just land rights. So when our race begins to die, and all our elders start to cry, please, white man, just realise the hurt you brought to the black man's eyes. So, the book is taken up and published by Fontana. And things arise because of the book. And of course the book I'm happy with, okay? Interestingly, I just read it in preparation for this talk, and I thought, could I have done a better job all this time later, decades later? The answer is no. There's a few little tricks I could have done with punctuation, and that's it.
If you're watching this from the safety and the warmth of a family home, you're probably not going to get very close to knowing what it's like to sleep out, to live without shelter, without any choice. In this International Year of the Homeless, when we're called on to at least think about people collectively labelled as deros or bums, Garry Sargeant has gone into their world. Sargeant is a journalist, and he's lived on the street, lived with the addicts, the drunks, the psychiatric patients, and the just plain homeless. He's written a book about it.
Garry Sargeant was only pretending. He slept out like this, but only for 3 nights. It was research, not real life. But he didn't like it much all the same.
Some people sort of find it as a liberating experience because they don't have possessions to worry about, they don't have that sort of thing to worry about. It can be an addictive experience, so you get addicted to sort of that sort of feeling of drifting and not having anything other than what's on your back to worry about. But I mean, you're talking about pain and hunger and cold, and like I slept in this park and somebody was stabbed around the corner that night and found out the next morning. So it's not a real secure existence.
Matthew Talbot Hostel in Sydney's Darlinghurst caters for hundreds of homeless men every day. It was one of the places Garry went to for a feed, after being commissioned to write about the plight of the homeless. This book, 3 Nights on Nowhere Street, was the result of his experience.
The first night I drifted into a refuge. A Mission Beat van came past and I got in the van and I drifted. And then the next morning I met a group of Aboriginals, Mick and Apples and Lulu, and they were great to me. I mean, they showed me where to sleep and where to get food, and they lent me a blanket at night, and I drank with them, and they were really great to me. So I was lucky. This is Apples.
Apples.
The book is in part dedicated to. Yeah. Actually, Apples and I slept together in the park with. Well, we didn't sleep together. We slept separately.
Yeah, we slept separately
in the park with Mick.
As it turned out, it was lucky that these people were Garry's friends. Life on the streets can be far from peaceful.
Asked my name, I told him my name's David Egan. And he just said, whose bong's that? And then when he told me to put the bong out, he told me to chuck the bong outside, I went down the stairs. He was searching that other fella's room.
Hey, why don't we go to jail?
How are you going to go to jail?
We're going to...
There's 3 cop cars up here.
We are, mate. Mean it. I'm sick of telling lies to you. That's to the coppers that you do.
The row was over allegations of theft from a police officer's car, which the Aborigines said they were being blamed for.
We told the police that we're only just drunks.
Yeah.
And we don't harm nobody there or nothing, we don't do nothing wrong. So why pick on us? Because they're looking for him, not us.
John, you live in the refuge, and both of you live in the refuge. And they're both John.
No, I lived in the Air Ridge shelters
live
in
here.
Belfast when
Yes.
it was bombed.
Did you?
Yes,
Right.
it was blown to hell
And so how long have you been in Australia?
since 1952.
Right. And how long have you been living in the refuge?
This
I
is
wouldn't
not...
have a clue.
We don't live in a refuge, we live at Matthew Talbot.
Oh, right. And what do you think about the people who sleep out on the street?
Well, that's their fault.
Oh, I'm living in the squatters at the moment.
You're in a squat.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And how long have you been staying in the squat?
one night,
Oh, right.
last night, till someone fell on top of them.
And how long have you been living around here, in the refuges around here?
Oh, about 20 years.
20 years. Where were you before that?
Well, I used to be normal. I used to work. But then when I had a heart attack, they put me on a pension.
Uh-huh. And there wasn't anything else much to do?
So they told me I wasn't allowed to work anymore. So that was that.
This ain't no place for losers or the innocent of mind. It's a full-time job for anyone to stay alive. The streets have set our boundaries for a war that's never won. What a wasteland full of broken dreams and hired guns. Shelter me, baby, shelter me. When I'm sinking down the losing ground, shelter me.
Some people have real severe mental disabilities. Some people have addictions like alcohol or drugs or to gambling. And the kids up the cross are often addicted to, a fast lifestyle and excitement and all that sort of thing. People are kicked out of their homes. People have been caught in debt traps. It's real mixed lot.
Garry Sargeant with some of Sydney's homeless, and the book is called 3 Nights on Nowhere Street.
One of the interesting things about that is the director of that segment was quite a young lady, and she was totally freaked out, like the social work students who got freaked out when they came onto the street and saw these people with lights on and not much home. So that's why I ended up doing the interviews, right? Because she couldn't do it, so I ended up. This was an article that appeared in actually on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald, and it uses the phrase street to nowhere, and it actually references my book. And in order to do the sections that were on national TV, I had to go back, of course, to see people that I'd seen on the street, including to Matthew Talbot. So I walked in, and this guy said, "You're the guy that wrote the book. Let me shake your hand." We loved the book, okay? We loved the book. So we didn't like the article, had something in common with me, but we loved the book. And see, he said, for people come in, usually when we have social work students come in, they're like in a state of shock with the people they're meeting, the mentally shot people, etc. And they'd like, but now they're coming in literally holding a copy of your book, and they're fine. They're prepared, right? I gave a talk to some social work students, and one of them said, "Do you think I should go and live on the streets?" And I said, "Definitely not. Read the book." And they said, "Do you think, how would you have gone if it had been longer?" And I said, "I got better at being homeless, right? I could have spent the whole time in the refuge. You get better at things." Who recognises this guy? Hard to recognise. It's Mitch Snyder, who is a legend with the US working for the homeless and things. And I got to meet him in the US when I went there. He looked at the book. And I'd never seen a guy who had pain etched so deeply in his face. When meeting all these homeless people that he had to turn away because they didn't have any more beds in the refuge. And they had a different philosophy about refugees that was like their home. They could stay there all day long. They didn't get kicked out or anything. And they actually did they actually made a telly-movie out of his life starring Martin Sheen, Samaritan, the Mitch Snyder story. You can watch it on YouTube, it's there. And a couple of years later, Mitch Snyder got dumped by his girlfriend and he committed suicide. So it's sad. But now, the other thing that I suspect was an outcome of the book is about 8 months after the book was launched, they did the first ever sleep out in Sydney where people would go there and they'd experience a little taste of what it's like that homeless people have to sleep through. And of course they weren't supervised, they weren't in danger. But one of the things, when they interviewed one of the women, said, "It's so noisy here." It's like, yeah, tell me about it. When I went off the street and I slept in my parents' night I'm lying in bed thinking, what the hell, something strange here. And I realised what it was quiet, right? Oh, what happened to the student report cards that she turned down? By the way, I should go back. By the way, the editor, we had to bounce the book off the editor, the manuscript. She was very, very upset. Oh, you're very sanctimonious. You know, I shouldn't have employed a non-professional like you. What happens between a journalist and an editor is sacred and shouldn't be like public. It's all right for me to go out in the street, not say I'm a journalist, right? We can use their names, but, you know, don't do journalism about journalists, right? No, can't do that. So we had to delete her name and the names of anybody in the photographer and everything. So she's just referred to as the editor. And as my agent reminded me, that whatever her flaws, because of her idea for the article, you know, powerful things came out of it. So the article that she turned down, student report card translating, actually became the banner article in the Daily Mirror. It's like the banner that they put outside the newsagents and stuff, the article of the day. And I gathered them all together, all these translating articles, and it came out as my second book, The Complete Guide to Translating Australian Bullshit. Oh, I thought I would, in those sort of days, don't try to read the letter. I'm going to read it out for you. In those days, you didn't have a lot of contact directly with readers, right? Because, you know, no emails and websites and stuff. So my brother sent a copy of the book to a friend of his. And so this is what she wrote to him. Dear Bruce, my brother, how does one say thank you enough for the gift of Garry's book? I loved every word and have found it totally unforgettable since finishing it. I look at the homeless so differently now, even look for them and truly notice that they are there. Walking through Central Station today was a new experience in awareness. What a drafty place to have to sleep. Needless to say, I filled 3 old clothes bags for the Salvation Army this week instead of waiting for a couple of months. I will be buying several more copies of the book for people I believe should read it. And she also wrote a letter to me. Dear Garry, thank you for signing your most remarkable book for me. I think you are an exceptionally fine writer to be able to evoke so simply yet clearly the story which needed to be told, and your conclusions are dynamic in their accuracy. Having been a copywriter and publicist, TV writer and producer of commercials, I really understood everything you said and didn't say about feelings of having your work diluted. I found your book profound, moving, and awareness-changing. I not only cried, but really sobbed at various points throughout, and was doubly moved to find a line or two on that you were sensitive enough to cry too. Not a trait I'd expect too often in a journalist. Not only that, but admitting it thrust you up into the clouds in my estimation. I'm proud to almost know you and to have read your wonderful book. In fact, having read it, I feel I do know you and admire and respect you tremendously. Congratulations, I trust there are many more books in you and hope to read them all. Thank you, Garry. Sincerely, Roma. I've got copies of it for sale for 300 baht, as well as some of my other books. And I really suggest, and it is available free online, by the way. See if I can bring it up. QR code here. You can go and you can read it free online. But I really, really suggest that you read the book, because reading the book is like a retro thing in itself. It takes you back, and you need to go back. And you've got to remember, this is a historical document. This is about homelessness on Sydney streets. It wasn't about homelessness in the US or Russia, or about homelessness now when there's so many families that were homeless. And in fact, in that, the woman starts to say, we're now experiencing for the first time homeless families. So if anybody can read the book and not feel some tugs of emotion, okay, fair enough, whatever. Yep.
Your editor didn't give you a lot of time to prepare, no time really. In retrospect, was that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it was actually a good thing in the sense that I was in that position of being hurled, like somebody hurled out of their home. And I ran into some women who were like young women who were escaping terrible situations at home, and they were like in that position where they didn't know how to be homeless, they didn't know where to go, how to get feeds, anything. So I think that was actually a good thing. What the bad thing was, there wasn't enough time to do the article proper justice at the other end. Oh, one more? Sorry.
Yeah, yes. I had a personal connection with this situation. I had a brother who was on the streets from about 25 to late 60s. But I was wondering if you could speak to sort of what you see as the primary reasons why this situation comes about. Mental disabilities, physical disabilities, dependence on, addiction issues. What do you see as the big drivers?
Well, it varies from place to place. Now, in the terms of the Aboriginals, Aboriginals were originally pretty mobile anyway, right? And it tended to be almost like an inherited state. And a lot of them had been adopted out because there was this tendency at one stage to adopt stolen generation that went into, they stole them from their parents and stuff. So that was a different case. And then, of course, there was the mentally shot people who were just really quite mentally shot. And then there's the alcoholics and the drug addicts and things like that. So there can be many different categories of the homeless. And, women escape, girls especially escaping from sexual violence and stuff like that. So it can vary very wildly. And this book takes you on a journey, and I don't propose, it's not a thesis on homelessness, it's actually a thesis on, become aware of them, all right? Don't look the other way. They're human beings, each with their own story.
You're back with us on Today. Well, this, you may or may not recall, is the International Year of Shelter for the Homeless. And ironically, across Australia, there's a steadily growing number of people forced to sleep out, and they include young people, families and the mentally disturbed. Garry Sargeant spent 3 days and nights with the homeless of Sydney earlier this year on assignment for a newspaper. Now, he's written a book about his experiences. It's called 3 Nights on Nowhere Street. Garry went back out onto the street for this report.
This is Nowhere Street. It could be a street in any city in Australia. This happens to be Sydney. Nowhere Street's where the homeless live, where we don't want to see them. And time on Nowhere Street, well, it tends to be measured in nights rather than days. It's where you spent the last night and where you're going to spend the next night. And with my time on Nowhere Street, I spent one night in here. It's this Swanton Lodge, which is a refuge for the homeless. These are the group dormitories that people stay in. They might stay here for a night, or some people stay here for months. They live here virtually. And this is actually the bed I slept in when I was actually on the street. Number 21. The number is etched forever in my mind. Breakfast, in fact any meal, is like a process line. They queue up, they pick up their meal, they sit down, they ingest nutrition, and then they go back out on the street to do nothing or to drink or just to wander around until I get another meal. This lady I actually almost met anyway, when I was at my time on the street, because she was queuing for a meal at the Hare Krishna place. She often queues there for a meal. Where did you sleep last night?
Well, I never tell where I sleep.
No, not where.
Different places. Oh, different places.
Yes.
I think most people do have different places to go to.
Yeah. So you slept on the street last night?
Well, on the street, no.
In a park or something like that?
Oh, no. Somewhere out of sight.
Somewhere out of sight?
No drunks, no lesbians, no hobos. Nothing like that around me.
Right.
18 months ago, we were seeing about 15% of our hostel population. Now, at least 60% of the people that we accommodate here every night are chronically mentally ill. Many of these people have spent years in mental institutions. They've been released into the community, but with no backup supports, they fall apart and they end up in the homeless scene.
Do you think the problem of homelessness in Sydney is growing?
Definitely. It's the people that we're seeing now are a lot younger. They're on the streets at a very early age, and yes, it's increasing.
Of course, not all the homeless actually get to stay in refuges. I suppose in some sense they're the lucky ones. Some sleep out in parks like this, and I know because when I was on the street, this just here is where I slept, and I slept here because a couple of Aboriginals showed me this is a safe park, and they slept on a mattress just nearby. Why this is a fairly good park to sleep in is because, well, for a start, there's chip bark to sleep on, which makes it a bit softer, and there's a wall here, so you can put your back to the wall, so you can only be approached from one side, which makes it a little safer. And also, you can probably hear how noisy it is. Well, it's noisy even late at night. Of course, one of the big problems about living on the street is the lack of security. You're vulnerable, you're open to violence, to people who think you're easy to roll, get a couple of dollars off. You had troubles with being victimised at all?
Yes, yeah.
What about that above your head there?
Oh, that was a couple of larrikins that did that.
Just your eyebrow?
Yeah.
And why did they attack you?
For money. Happens all the time around the place.
It's funny, when you're on the street, you sort of tend to drift. You sort of fall in the habit of just drifting through your life. You lose the ability to plan in advance because there's nothing worth planning for. It's International Year of Shelter for the Homeless now, but for a lot of them it'll be just another year that they drift through, days, nights, and there'll just be another series of nights on Nowhere Street.
I hope you got something you can take away from the talk, and I do recommend you read the book. You'll find it's a very powerful experience.
Good morning. I'm just curious, would you care to share about your thought process when you decided to change your name?
I've given a talk about it at the club, but unfortunately it's a fairly long talk. A book came out of it called The Secret Meaning of Names, and I'll come back to that if there's time later, and I can talk to you about it. For some reason that I can't explain, I feel called on that I should be giving talks. So I'm probably giving a talk every 6 weeks or so. Yep.
I think it was a very, very nice and a good presentation, and thank you very much. And it was very emotional. How old, may I ask, how old have you been when you did this, and how often have you done some reportage before? Is it not also a question of age to get so touched by it? Now when we get all, as I see, more or less older, I think we get a little bit more cynical about all these things, because and I think this emotional, what you had, and it was very important for your life, what I understood, is, I think it's not repeatable and very difficult when you're a certain age, because you saw so much and you just protect yourself. At this time, apparently, you were rather open to all this. Okay, this is my question.
I was 31. So.